Hello, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Nevinsky. I work at Lockheed Martin. Very recently moved out of our rotary emission systems business and focusing more in a corporate engineering role. Today I'm going to talk to you about what we've been doing and models that maybe some of you could take in building a larger spatial computing strategy. So first, let's take a look at what some of that maybe is doing for us, what it can do for us in the future, and maybe what we're doing with some of our partners.
Spatial computing is like a huge disruptive technology for Lockheed, for basically everything in the defense industry. It has a lot of impacts that are pretty far-reaching in every part of the life cycle of a product.
For Lockheed Martin, in the next 5 to 10 years, spatial computing is going to be an absolute core part of how we do business. Spatial computing really allows us to bring the 3D world our brain lives in directly in front of us, to where we see in context without a lot of guesswork mixed in with converting the 2D into 3D.
As things are modernizing, you're seeing companies within our space that are moving much more quickly to market. We can make sure we're moving sometimes orders of magnitude faster than we could without that technology. And to me, there's not really any other type of technology that you can do that with.
We build new concepts, new vehicles, new things that haven't existed, and we're not always working on existing platforms. We bring in spatial computing, particularly the extended reality type applications, and help people see, interact with, and understand what they're doing.
So if you look across each one of our business areas, we have pockets of teams that are building some technologies to solve some of these problems today. Operations analysis, with command and control, with maintenance, with training, with design reviews. We really just need to have a mechanism to scale those things and allow people to go apply them at a grander scale.
The cloud-based nature of the infrastructure that we've been building the spatial computing pipelines on have been hugely impactful for scaling. Amazon Web Services has been that great scalable interface for us.
Like, we see tremendous productivity increases in the places where we're leveraging that. On the order of 60 to 70% process efficiency in some of those areas where they're using it, which is pretty great.
This technology is shaping the future of aerospace and defense by enabling us to modernize our processes. We can make more affordable systems with less quality defects that are more sustainable.
So that gives you an idea of maybe some of what you can do now, what you can do in the future, and the idea of how do we scale these technologies. Because largely, building some of these strategies has been, we've had pockets of technologies within our business, and sometimes they've been competing with one another, not necessarily making the best use of some of the centralized funding we have to go forth on some of those efforts, which is going to hold you back from some of that scale. So the first thing was we needed to make sure we were speaking the same language. Everyone had a common understanding of what we meant and what the goal was that we want now and in the future. So first, when we're talking differentiating traditional computing and spatial computing, at the highest sense, it's really your data and your logic and adding in location. I would also add maybe dimensionality, and just making that simple for people that it's been a new concept too. What does that mean in terms of how you're going to experience that? So spatial computing enables advanced visualization, and that, at this conference, we've talked a lot about extended reality and what happens in that spectrum. For us, there's a lot of other things within that realm. That could be tactical displays, that could be large format screens, projections, any number of things. What that's really doing for us is empowering users to understand digital twins better. So not just seeing the flashy things you see in a headset, but actually understanding them in context, what it means for their particular use case at the point of need, what it means taking their existing understanding of the domain, the existing understanding of the facilities they work in, giving them the telemetry and visibility about the products that they're working on, and digitizing that to help them accelerate their processes. Longer term, we want to use that to help enable a multi-form factor type of metaverse. And we have some of those activities going on today, specifically in the mission side and working more towards also the industrial side. So the metaverse then becomes sort of our future state of how we're going to experience these digital twins given these mediums we've been talking about at this conference and others. And what that means architecturally is you have to have these different entry points because as we've heard about today from a human-centered design, not everyone needs or wants the exact same entry point into that. But they do need some things architecturally in terms of general persistence, general levels of teaming with each other, potentially with non-human kind of AI presences, as well as other ways of interacting with real or virtualized type of mediums. So for us, we looked at what do we want to get out of this and baseline from a metric standpoint. What is happening in industry to develop a cohesive plan there? So even going back, this study's a little bit old now from the Manufacturing Leadership Council, but they and others kind of put out similar things regularly. And we looked at some common trends being problem spaces or places where we could garner ROI, and what people were doing in those spaces to build together that cohesive plan so we can make the best use of the limited funding we had to go do that. So you take a look at some of these things. A lot of it comes around targeted areas for ROI where we could start to go look for opportunities, look for things that we could be doing. If you look at some of the market leaders there, a lot of them have common activity around, hey, let's make an organization to spearhead spatial computing and metaverse activities. Let's have a way to grow our workforce. Let's have a way to funnel the talent into making common functions for people to use as opposed to competing. So again, as I mentioned, organizations can be strapped for cash. Some of these technologies can offset that from a level of ROI or long-term net present value. Excuse me. And those are the things you probably want to start to identify early on. Those may be the people that you have to have come to the table and take their different pots of money and make it a similar color of money. You'll need them for sponsors and for executive champions later down the road, as well as those adopters you're going to need at the individual points of need. So there, how are you going to get started? And that can be difficult, especially in a company our size. We have roughly 120,000 employees, and then we've got several, thousands of other contractors, all kind of with their own individual needs, individual customers in different locations. Over time, we've been different companies that have come together that have different cultures. How do you find those internal allies and get them on the same page? So for us, we tried to start to take a look at where are we already meeting internally. We have internal conferences that are somewhat like this. We also have internal working groups, and we can start to poll those people and find out what are their common pain points. If I can find people with common pain points and I can fix their common pain points, I'm going to make some friends. That's really what I'm looking to go do. And if some of those friends have some deep pockets, that's also helpful, right? So we want to find those people initially and make sure we're on the same page. Now, those friends aren't going to be friends very long if we're not satisfying those immediate needs, but if you're just putting out fires forever, you're never really going to make any progress. So you do have to kind of balance those satisfying the immediate needs, helping them continue to make progress with their customers, especially if there's something really pressing, like an update to a new functionality that needs to get out the door, maybe a corrective action that a regulating body is coming to you with. Those are very pressing needs. We need to take care of those and then incrementally have a plan to make those long-term sustainable, be able to spread those out to other people. What that's going to need to be is, as we're making some successes in those small pockets, we need to be able to share that knowledge, share the capabilities that we've made to go do that with other people. We can talk about mechanisms, how to do that a little bit later. And also, we need to have the general connectivity between all of these things, which is going to be a lot of kind of glue technologies that we don't often talk about. We see the flashy things with what can I do with a level of render, what can I do with AI. We don't necessarily talk about what is the underlying infrastructure that you really need, what are the security controls that you really need, what are the general cultural things you really need in order to scale these things. So let's talk about some of those enablers and the way that you might start to gauge what's the most important to me. And I'll give you a sample smattering of these and the exercise that we've gone through to start to look at what are some common things that we agree that we want to go after. So we polled, like I talked about, find those common friends, your partners in crime. What are their pain points? What are things that we all agree that between all of our individual domains? So at Lockheed, maybe that is mission needs. Maybe that's engineering and operations. That could be business development. That could be employee collaboration. That could be looking in the commercial side. all of those underpinning technologies there can support these things. So some of that could be, how am I going to do my conversion and optimization pipelines? How am I going to have a spatial data plane in order to stage those things? How am I going to have common multi-user utilities for people to be in those experiences together? I don't want to build those 50 times over, right? I want to build it one time. I don't have a ton of money. And for us, we need to look at strategically, how important is it? We need to agree between our group of people, and within the space of things that we have, things we know in the market, we may say things are at a higher or lower maturity. And what these smattering of technologies may be is going to be different for every company. What the level of maturity for you and what you have at your company, or what happens to be important to you, is going to be different. But I would say that upper right-hand quadrant is going to be your low-hanging fruit. We know it's high importance, so you're going to be able to get people behind it. We know it's highly mature, so you're also going to be able to get it on programs, get it into IRADs, get it in with customers, get ATO in those a lot more quickly, rather than having to do a lot more work to develop that. So those are the things we wanted to go target first. Next, we need to break down, looking under the hood. We know a lot of our visualizers are based on the same technology. Maybe that's a game engine, maybe that's some sort of web technology, but at its core, we have very similar technologies under the hood. And is there a way, rather than having people competing in making different visualizers in different pockets of the business, can we say, well, we don't have to have just one, because everyone has their individual user experience needs. They have, what their customer-facing experience happens to be. We don't want to pull the rug on that, but can we refactor? Can we take some of those things and say, I'm going to make a common library, right? And how do we go do that? And where do we store those things? So you can refactor some of those existing products and think about things. I know going into school, a lot of us were told object-oriented is everything. You're going to inherit from this top-down parent class, and you're going to go from there. You need to think backwards from that and take a composition over inheritance type of approach. If you think about, all of us are familiar with using game engines like Unity, like Unreal, and you go to their asset stores, right? What you're doing is you're taking puzzle pieces, right? You're taking Lego blocks, and you're putting those things together, and you're assembling, and you're writing some code to take it the last mile. But effectively, a lot of people are using the same type of thing. So we wanted to take that idea and allow people to contribute some of those things that they've made that are useful to other people back to effectively an asset store, and allow for this type of thing. Have a common framework of Lego blocks, right? And we would rather be building these individual functions and individual small capabilities rather than individual products that effectively are competing against one another. Now, once you start doing that and you identify opportunities, how are you going to act together, right? How are you going to have a common organizational structure that allows you to accelerate these things? We need to account for some of these ideas. Where do we go find them? Where do we go let people know what capabilities we have, what technology happens to be out there, what are the skills that people are going to need in order to be able to ramp up and take this on themselves, with a more teach people to fish as opposed to giving them a fish every single time type of approach. How do we have the user experience outreach to know really that we're making the right thing, we're solving the right problem, right? That is going to be our outreach and education type of organization. Then we need to move into lower TRL type of opportunities. So I need to foster those. I need to incubate those opportunities. I need to work, have some back and forth with those individuals, and then have something that I can have minimally viable to bake in with my next part of my organization. So, project engagements, developer advocacy. So taking those things, empowering developers on teams to say, hey, I made a piece of functionality that you don't have to develop, but you can go take this thing, be prosperous, take the credit for it, I don't care, right? But go forth and do this thing. And then we can also have that service enablement team on the farthest side that has the highest TRL things that we've developed over time, we've proved out on programs, and they can have it as an enterprise service for people. At the top level, you do have to have some level of vision, some level of management to prioritize and help figure out what are we doing from cost, schedule, things like that. And the most important piece there is going to be a general steering committee across your BAs. For us, we have our fixed-wing aeronautics business, we have missiles and fire control, we have our space business, we have our rotary mission systems, and we have our enterprise, and they all have their own individual needs. We have to have representatives there to make sure we're giving a fair shake to everybody for us. Otherwise, you have a lot of bias come in, some people can't use those functions, and then this all falls apart. So for me, that happens to be that voice of the people that need this happens to be the most important part of having this operating model. But at the end of the day, it ends up being, how do we take that idea that could be maybe a back of a napkin drawing type of, I want to go do this, this is the problem I have, and this is what I think maybe works, but I'm not an expert in this. How do we solve this? That's where our outreach comes in, and we move it along, like I said, over to eventually having a plan to move this through a level of incubation, trialing it, not getting stuck in that death by pilot, death by POC, and having long-term service enablement on these things. So then the next thing is, we know we can't do everything ourselves. We're a really big company, but there are times and a place for building things ourselves, or for getting things from the open source, or finding who can provide a service for us. So for example, if we need a hyperscaler because the underlying compute for this is enormous, well, maybe I need to go to a cloud provider. You saw in the beginning with AWS, we work with Azure, we work with Google. We have some of those partners, and to put the right technology in the right place at the right time, that isn't necessarily within our business model to say we're going to go do that ourselves. There may be things on the AI side, there may be sensors or other things, headsets, where it doesn't behoove us to go make our own thing if someone's already made something that's way better than we're going to make in the time frame that we need. So that becomes very important, and part of the reason we value coming to things like this, meeting a lot of you downstairs and seeing what you have to offer, it's really helpful, and I think any enterprise should be valuing, how do I balance that build versus buy, and identifying those strategic partnerships. Next thing is baselining and growing your talent. So we've talked a lot about digital twins of our products or our facilities, and we don't really think about people. At the end of the day, it is people that need to make the solutions that we're providing. And how do you ensure that you know that those people are growing and they have the right talent? How do you ensure that you're finding the right people to bring into your company? How do you have that apples to apples comparison to say this level of people should be appropriated this amount of funding for their salaries, this is how we're going to do levels and promotions and titling. If you just have a baseline description and everyone has their own interpretation of that, it becomes kind of difficult. And when you have recruiters who aren't necessarily engineers going out to try and find you talent, they don't have anything to work from. When you have your people that are in charge of maybe your training and curriculum development, they may not have expertise in every engineering domain under the sun. So for us, we started making what we call engineering competency models, which gives us a digital twin of our workforce and what their skill happens to be. And over time, we can take a look at these things and say, what does it take to do this, right? In spatial computing, maybe software acumen, 3D modeling, data management, hardware acumen, human factors, security, and many other things, right? And we can do this across different disciplines and say, hey, this job code equals this set of skills. And when you have this smattering of skills, this can be this level. You can find people that maybe have weaknesses in some areas where other people have strengths and combine those for mentoring and more quickly grow your workforce. Because there's only so many of us to go around to create these XR experiences. We need more people. We don't grow in trees. We have to go develop them and have a strategic way to go do that. So then we want to put those pieces together, right? And so these building blocks here may fluctuate in size for people on what the level of importance happens to be to you, right? If you're going to go work more with your partners in crime, and maybe you're a smaller company that doesn't have the resources to say, I'm going to grow as much of my talent, that building block may be a lot bigger than say, I'm going to grow as much of my internal talent. Maybe over time, you want to figure out, how do I swap some of those things out, and I can have maybe fewer partners and larger amount of talent, or maybe both of those need to grow depending on what your scale is. You need to understand how these need to have a relationship with each other. What are those common enablers going to be? What are they for me now? What are they going to be in the future? Are there going to be things that I need to make now, and later on there may be a partner that takes that on and I no longer have to worry about it? You can't have a plan for, forever, right? Because these things change so rapidly. If you look at some of the AI models, every 6 months we have a new advancement, and some of these things become irrelevant to move on to a new thing. However, we do need to have some sort of 6 month, 1 year, maybe 2 to 5 year plan of what we're going to be doing there. And then some level of central ownership. So we propose a factory type of organization. It could be in your corporate engineering office. It could be in an IT office. It kind of depends where that internal partnership lies, where that sponsorship lies, but you do need to figure out how you're putting those together. So with that, again, if there's any discussion we want to have on these things, any questions, wanted to leave some time for that.
Yeah, good talk. Thank you. Where do you see major areas of opportunity for XR as well as XR and AI in your company and in general?
A lot within the engineering and operations space. I think there's a lot to be had there. If you think about, for example, quality inspection. If you're thinking things that are very automated in a more, like in the automotive industry where we don't have as much variability, you're putting out things on a line, you can have a lot of robotics there. It's very different than when you're in the aerospace and defense, where there are sometimes we may make one of an item, right? Or in the hundreds or in the low thousands. And the variability there doesn't make sense for us to have this fully robotic automated line. You have humans there, you need to do some level of augmentation. Those humans are going to have to make sure that what they're doing is correct. It's safe, there isn't foreign object debris in an area, things aren't damaged, you're putting the right things in the right places. So your fuse panel values on an electrical fuse panel, they're the right values. When you're putting a wire harness in, you don't have pins that are bent or out of place and causing problems there. So we can use XR to take a look at, hey, was this the right thing? And even be hands-free and ask an agent to perform some of the activity, send it off to your MES system to record what you've done there from that quality assurance standpoint, or help you with that auditing there. Taking a look at training, how are we going to make sure that people have knowledge to build the things that they're going to do with work instructions, so maybe we can have less training overall. If we're doing troubleshooting, say you're having something come in for sustainment, taking a look at something and understanding like what happens to be out of place, what's damaged here, what might need to be replaced, how do I do diagnostic on these things. That whole engineering life cycle, as we're looking at individual pieces of that for a product, every one of those can have an insert point. If you're talking about maybe our mission space, there could be things in how do I make sure people navigate an area safely, how do I give people more awareness of what they're doing in a cockpit, how do I provide maybe maintainers in the field awareness of what's coming in so they can understand, hey, there were sensors on this aircraft and these are the things that are going to need to be replaced. And I can go start looking at, hey, I know it's going to be in the tail section, or I know it's going to be in the wing section that needs to be fixed that come in. So you really just think about what are people having to do on a day-to-day basis in the product lifecycle, out in the field, and what is the problem they have. You probably can find something at that point of need.
Hey, Brian. Vital topic, great delivery. You look at the value to Lockheed, and then look at the supply chain. What do you see as the proportion of value potentially, both short-term and long? And any other comments on that paradigm?
Yeah. So the supply chain, I mean, for us, if we need to ramp up quickly, a lot of times, like we can do a lot of things ourselves, but like I said, you need to find those partners. That happens to be a lot within your supply chain. In order for you to move quickly, your supply chain also needs to be able to move quickly. So there are times where you'd say, hey, I have these capabilities. Do I want to just keep them in-house, or do I want to also be able to push them into my supply chain? Do I want to plan with them to be able to have information from my digital twins throughout the life cycle of the parts that are coming into these things? Because again, we're not just a builder of everything that we do. We build certain strategic things, and then we also source certain things. So we are largely a systems integrator. So the supply chain is very, very important. And if you can funnel their data in with yours from a digital twin standpoint, visualize logistically where things are coming from, you may think about, hey, from a contested logistics standpoint, or even just like a natural disaster standpoint, maybe I'm sole sourced in an area, and that area happens to be getting flooded a lot, or have problems with items not being able to get out. I don't have any real visibility of that other than charts and graphs without really being able to see that in a more interactive way. If I can say, I'm going to have a smattering of suppliers for a certain type of part or subsystem that are in different areas that have different ways of getting that item to me, that's going to be a little bit more helpful. You also can talk about when you're proposing a program and you need to get support from the government who's going to pay for it. You can also talk about, hey, well, in my supply chain, I also have suppliers that are in Alabama or in Nebraska or in Hawaii or wherever, right? And by doing that, I'm providing jobs in your district, and I can show that more interactively rather than just on charts and graphs and giving them numbers. I can make it more tangible for them to show where in their district that's being impacted through those supply lines. What that means in terms of what we need for infrastructure, and how does that impact what their job happens to be, in Congress.